Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar on Mine and Quarry projects in RoadEng. My name is Patricia, and with me today is Matthew Dickey, our resident webinar expert. Our content for today includes typical mining and quarry project elements such as stockpile, pits, an in-pit ramp, and then we are going to look into a whole road design and optimization. All of this will be done using RoadEng. RoadEng has two modules. Terrain module is for the stockpiles, pit, and your topo surface. And then in location, we will do roads, ramps, and earthwork optimization. Some housekeeping reminder for this webinar, please ask questions and engage with us. You can just type your questions at any time using that panel in GoToWebinar. And with this brief introduction, I will pass it over to you, Matt.
Perfect. Well, thank you, and I will start sharing my screen here. All right, so yeah, I'll take a run through some common design and modeling challenges associated with the mining sector. Of course, mining is very broad, so I won't go into a tremendous amount of depth on some of these things, but we'll point you towards other resources if you'd like further explanation on some of that. And yeah, we'll try to give an overview. So an overview and touch on some key considerations as we work through it. So today's example, as introduced there, we are going to cover a combination of these bulk earthworks items like pit design, quantifying stockpile volumes, but then we're also going to consider that linear infrastructure side of things. So that's probably the most kind of fundamental concept, is that we're going to be working in two different modules to do those two different things. So the terrain module is where we're going to take our topo survey information and model a tin out of it, but it's also where we're going to do the design of our pit. Now, when it comes time to jump over into road design, we're going to tackle that in location. And the whole premise there is that we've got a center line with cross-section geometry attached to it. So as we move the center line around in 3D, it's going to interact with the surrounding surface. Yeah, and then we're also going to touch on some optimization stuff and maybe even give a sneak preview of something coming up in our next version. So first thing, we are going to start by creating a topo surface. We want to know what's there in order to design what we'd like to design. So I've opened terrain, I'll click insert file, and we can bring in all sorts of different file formats. In the project that I'm working on today, we're going to just use some DEM data. Now, you also work very well with the raw LiDAR data, so the LAS, LAZ data. Also work with those common formats such as DWG, DGN, the land XML, and even that raw survey data, so your total station RTK type survey data. One thing that is worth considering for these point cloud data sets is the data sets can be very heavy. So if I have all sorts of different tiles that I could bring in, well, I might not want all of the data. So it might be an area of interest where anything outside of that area of interest I'm not interested in. So I'm going to bring in a polygon to start. So this is just a shapefile. Could have drawn it myself. And then I'm going to click insert file, and I'm going to grab my DEM data. And this stuff is just in TIFF. The TIFF can either be an image or DEM. So we're going to select DEM. And here we can tell it, well, I want to bring in all of the information inside of that polygon. I'll select selection tab, add, I'm going to add in that polygon. And I'm going to tell it outside of that polygon, I want to skip all of my points. Now this doesn't take too long. It probably takes about a minute. But since we have kind of a broad topic and lots of ground to cover today, I'm going to go with the cooking show approach. Instead of clicking OK and watching that cycle through and bringing all the points for about a minute, I'm going to hit cancel. I'm going to jump ahead to what would be the next step. So when we bring that in, all those LiDAR points are going to be brought in. They're going to be selected to start. And they're going to take a little while to draw. So we'll probably hit cancel here. To go with the cooking show approach and have a bunch of things kind of in the wind here, but I'll have to open a few files on the fly here. So when we bring in that LiDAR data, we're going to get this big magenta blob. We're going to go up to the ribbon here, hit train modeling, click generate, and model our contours. And we can see we've already got our contours here. And that's another thing that would take about a minute for a file like this to generate. And that's kind of an important topic, that we have this topo surface to work from. Now, if we want to, we can tackle one of those bulk earthworks kind of considerations. And for this, we will use we'll start with a pit. And we're going to keep our pit really simple. But we're going to jump out of the existing version of Train that we're running. We're going to open up another instance of it. And I'm going to right-click background. And so I'll click that. So I've just added this Train file that we've already created with our surface in it in as a background. I can click zoom to extend so I can see that Train file from this Train file. Now, if I want to design my pit, I'm going to start by drawing a feature. So I'll go up here, I'm going to click new feature. I'll call it pit floor. I'm going to just draw this in like that. And so right now that floor that I've drawn in, I've done it fairly arbitrarily at this point, but I can take that, there's a direction associated with it. So I can click along here and I can see, well, it's going counterclockwise. So if I want to put cut or fill slopes off to the side of this polygon, I can. Now, as is, if we click our 3D view just to see what we have going on, I'm going to right click, I'm going to make it so I can see that topo surface as a surface. And so we can see we're way below ground there. So I probably want to move that up. So I'm going to just hover here and I can see that my tin elevation is at 326, where this feature is down at 100. So if I want that to be shifted up, let's shift it up to 270. We can see we're poking out into fill there. And now we will do that grading. So we want to grade to our right. Again, check the direction of the feature with the arrow keys. And we'll tell it, well, I want to target my cut slopes to go up to that, and fill slopes to go up to this target surface, which is my background. And I can navigate to whatever I'd like there for files if it wasn't already in as a background. I'm going to tell it to interpolate my slopes in 10-meter spacing. I'm going to set my daylight to be a tin boundary. I'm going to tell it to calculate a tin as we go. I'm going to make sure I have my maximum side length set. And I'm also going to calculate my volumes. And of course, I've got my lefts and rights messed up. So I'm going to go to the other side because I went the wrong direction with it. And we can see here, our cut slopes are now going out from that pit floor feature that we've drawn. And well, we can't see it in our 3D view, but if we'd like, we can go in here and we can say, well, I want this 3D surface to be transparent. So there we can see the back slope, we can see where we're shifting around. If we want to make adjustments, we can. I'll grab that pit floor feature. I'll say, let's pull this in here. And we can redo that grading functionality and refine what we're dealing with. So that's a really kind of straightforward pit example. Now we can tackle all sorts of complexity. It could be that we want to have benches. It could be that we want to step portions of it, put things on grades, and there's workflows and functionality to do all those things. And just without going into all the details, if we wanted to, let's just clean this up here. If we wanted to build our steps out, one useful functionality for our benches is to go in here, click buffer, and we can say, well, let's buffer to the right. We'll go out 10 meters. Let's go 5 meters at that. So we've added that on there. Now we can buffer that next ring. We can keep that flat for our next buffer. And I won't do that the whole way up, but we could also use functionality like grading to an elevation. I'm going to grade this up to 375. So here where I'm going up through the actual topo surface, if I decide I want to trim that, I can just come in here, calculate our intersection feature. And I can use that intersection feature to trim my surface. So select feature by boundary. I'm just going to get rid of everything that extends out past that. I'm going to redo that tin. Oh. And I'm going to make it a boundary. Didn't hit apply last time. So now that surface is trimmed out and we can see we've got that bench in the bottom. Now the other strategy we can use to tackle benching for our pits design is to do it as in location and using a cross-section template to do it for us. So I won't do that today, but I'll talk about it. And we have a video that covers that workflow. So our pits are pretty straightforward. The next thing that we have is on our list to talk about is stockpiles. So if we were doing this from a design, it would be very much the same thing, just the opposite, where we'd be filling instead of filling instead of cutting. So that's great from a design standpoint. Workflow is very much the same. The other thing that we could have is if we had a survey, and rather than doing what we have here in two surfaces to calculate between, so if I go up here, calculate between our current surface is surface A and our other surface is topo, it will give us our volumes. The other thing that we could do is, well, we could just do a calculation between a single surface. And I'm going to just try and find a quick file for an example for that. So it's a lot smaller of a scale. So here I've got a standard survey. I've got these two stockpiles in the survey. I can take these features and I can say, well, so these selected features, I'm going to call them pile, and I'm going to make them a surface volume boundary. So if I just want to know how much volume is in these two piles, so pile 1 and pile -0, I can click terrain modeling, calculate volumes enclosed by a single surface. We're going to report our volumes by polygon. So that's surface volume boundary here. And we can see that pile 1 has a fill volume of 115 cubes and pile 2 has a fill volume of 210 cubic meters. So pretty straightforward. And then the other thing worth mentioning here is if you have a designed surface like that pit that we were looking at, and I'll go with something a little prettier to talk about here. If we had a surface like this, we could take that and we could merge that into our surrounding topo. So it would just be going into the original ground file. First, we'd want to save it out as something new. And we can go up here, click merge, and we can say, well, let's take this other file and we can merge it into this one that we have. So we can click OK. Now, again, I'm going to skip that. It'll take a moment to do the trimming, but it's basically a kind of cookie cutter operation that clips out the extents of that one surface, places the other file in there, and then we can create something that looks like this. So that surface that we've designed for our pit has been merged in, and we've modeled those as a single surface. So that's kind of a quick overview of kind of some functionality there for either modeling our pits or stockpiles as these bulk earthworks, where we're kind of tinning them and using the ability to create new features to model what we'd like to design. And then the next thing on our to-do list here is to tackle a road. And I'm going to split up what we do for our roads here into kind of a couple different buckets. So we're going to tackle our surface road separately from our pit ramp, and you don't have to do that at all. It's more just so we can kind of break this up into kind of bite-sized considerations. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to use the new feature that I said I'd preview, and I guess I should probably open that in the right version. So the standard way to do this is, well, we're going to take this file that we want to design with and we're going to open it up in location. And opening is the wrong word. We're going to reference it in location. So up until this point, we've been working in terrain. So we're going to go into location, and before I use that fancy new tool in our upcoming release, we'll give an overview of a conventional design. So from location, I'm going to click new. I'm going to reference that file that we have. So I'm going to go with that topo merged with bit. I am going to just start with a single point. And we can zoom out here and we can see our plan view, what we have going on. We've got that pit that we've designed. We can click our 3D view. We can customize that. So I'm going to make it so we can see the surface. So there we are. The road as I design it, this is optional here, but as I design it, I'd like to see the road that I'm designing as its own surface. So we're going to add a corridor surface in. And we're going to go over to our plan view and we're going to manually click in where we'd like to take this thing. And like I said, I'm going to treat our ramp and our surface haul road separately. So I'm going to click kind of where I expect to start this thing, and we can click along. And as we do, we can see our profile views updating. We can see our 3D views updating. And along my alignment, my cross section is going to show me the cross section I have attached to it. So the first real design thing that we're going to do is we're going to attach a template that's appropriate to our center line. We're going to make sure we have a template to apply that we'd like to use. Our templates are stored in the template editor. And here I've got a template already created that does what I'd like it to. So I've got a haul road template that uses our mine haul road with safety berm. I've got benches being added automatically. I've got berms being added automatically. So it's really painless to run. It's figuring out all this geometry stuff on the fly for me. Now these two templates that I have here aren't default templates. So we would take our template that we want to use as a starting point. And if we want to build something new to use, well, I don't want this cross-section geometry. I'm going to go to our eLibrary. I'm going to grab in these template components. So my roadway, let's use mine haul road with safety berm. We'll take that, we'll hit copy. We're going to paste this in here. We can configure it as we'd like. So let's go 12, berm height 3, and paste as right. So now we've got this new template that we can use and pull from. And we can do the same to add in different classes of components to our template, and we don't really have to do much work. It's all just a matter of finding the component that we'd like, configuring it as we like, so basically a fillable form, and pasting it into the template that we'd like to use and create. Once we've done that, we can hit OK, and then we have all these options to pull from for what we assign along the length of our road. Now for this, I'm going to use one that's already created, this haul road. I'll just hit cancel, hit assign. And we could go through and we could click along. Now, the current way to do this is we actually choose the location manually. We can see how we're interacting with things. We've got our mass haul diagram down here, tracking our surplus and deficits. So the first step would be to select a horizontal alignment that does what we'd like it to do. Rather than doing that entirely by hand, I'm going to use a new feature. So in this file, I've clicked in my start and end point. I've got those selected. I'm going to click this button here, and I'm going to put in my design constraints. So I'm going to say minimum maximum grade of 15%, and the UI for this is going to change, so don't worry too much about all the buttons and options that I'm pressing, but let's get this to do something. So let's go in here. I'm just changing my design parameters to reflect what I'd like. I'll hit OK. I'll hit OK. And this is going to take a couple minutes to, maybe not even a couple minutes, but the software is actually figuring out the best path for where to put the road. Now, it's not going to consider it at kind of that micro level that you will for kind of putting the finishing touches on things, but we can use this to generate a really good starting point. Rather than clicking in arbitrarily and narrowing in on where we'd like to put the road by hand, we're going to use this to generate something. I suspect this will probably take, well, it's already found a solution. I'll let it run a little bit longer. It won't go much longer. And then we'll have something to use.
Maybe in the meantime, Matt. Oh, sorry, it's done already.
Yeah, yeah. It was kind of, wasn't sure whether we use that as our
Great.
an opportunity for questions, but we've ran it.
Okay.
I've got it to run a single iteration here,
Okay.
and it's telling me that this is a good representation of what to where to put my road when I'm designing it. A couple things that I've done in the background previously, I've got some penalties applied to things like streams and areas that I don't want to go. So it's taking that into account as well as my earthworks costs to get from point A to point B. And of course, I'm in that. So I'm going to already run this. I'm going to just switch the terrain file that I have referenced. And rather than clicking this in and not knowing where I should put things, I can see I've got a line to follow. So I'm going to follow that line. And specs are going to make sense because they're going to follow the specs that I had entered. So let's go along here. And if we remember, I had a 15% grade. That's a maximum grade. And we will click this in, see what we're dealing with. And I mentioned my mass haul down here is going to keep track of my surplus and deficits for me. And for this, I'm planning to use our vertical optimizer. So I'm not really worrying too much about that. I'm just making sure I've got kind of the right general area to put things. I'm going to apply my horizontal curves. So we'll come in here and we'll apply that. Let's go 60. So I'm getting something reasonable here for my curves. I allowed this to go tighter than that when I was running the Pathfinder. Let's apply that as my default. And rather than going through and really getting into the details here, I'm going to tell the software to optimize my vertical alignment for me. So I'm going to go to Project Explorer, Vertical Optimization. Let's go there. I'm going to put in those same standards. We'll go 15 and 15. And let's go with a sag of 12 and crests of 11. I'm going to add a control point. And let's run this. So, and this is going to take a moment to sample along our alignment, and then it's going to find the cheapest possible vertical alignment given my design constraints here. So with that, it's I guess it's going to be quick. I was going to say we have a moment for questions, but it should be fairly quick here now.
It's almost over here.
Yeah, it's almost over. So the software has gone through, and rather than me designing my vertical by hand, it's found the cheapest vertical given the horizontal that we've selected. And it's narrowing in on the best solution. We know we're within 2% of the optimal solution now, so I'm going to just take cancel and we'll roll with that. So we're very close to the optimal solution.
Excellent.
And there we are. So we've got our road. We've got our berm applied where we should have a berm. Now we're not stuck with any of this. We can move and adjust the alignment in both the horizontal or the vertical. but in a very short time, we've narrowed in on a really good design that's taking into account the things that we'd like to account for. So the next thing to kind of tackle on our list of things to do is our ramp. So to do this, I am going to first click horizontal, and I'm going to just do this as a new alignment, just because I said I'd keep it separate. So we'll come down here. And well, I'm going to say let's start at that back corner of the pit. And of course, as we saw in the other alignment, I'm going to want to make sure I have a reasonable cross section here. So we'll go in here, same thing. I'll use this one as a starting point. So the same one that we've designed our surface road with. One thing that I'm going to do differently here though is I've got this bench template attached. For my pit, where my pit benches, the grade of the bench themselves is flat, I'm going to use a different template. I want to tie in with those. So I'm going to go on to our slopes component. I'm going to grab our, where is it? Flat benches. I'll hit copy. I'll paste this in here. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to configure this to do what I'd like. So I'm setting a datum. I don't want my benches and my fill slopes, just if I'm cutting. I'll set my parameters as I'd like. I'm going to go with a 20-meter bench base width of that. And we'll go 1-to-1 for everything. We'll apply that to the other side. Base does right. And this is going to get those to line up for us. So we'll hit OK. We are going to apply that new template that we've created. And just so we can see what we have going on here, again, I'm going to add in that other surface for my horizontal alignment too. So we can see here, and it's going to look funny until we have a grade. And we will design this and make it better than a 25% climb to get out of there. But just the premise of that bench template component that we have applied is those benches are lining up with what we have designed here. So if we look at it, the perspective is kind of funny, but the flat part of our bench is lining up with the flat part of that. So we're tying in nicely. Now for this, we're going to want to wiggle around a little bit here. So I'm going to, again, shoot for that 15% grade. I want to come out at the top here, and I'm going to have tighter corners to get out to where I want to be. let's pull this around. So I'm pulling that back. We've got more room to make grade. So I'm watching my grade here, and this is the pull that back. I'm gonna drop that down on the front. We're gonna want curves. So, and again, we're gonna go tight here. So I'll go with tighter curves. We'll cycle through. Let's go 35 here. Go even larger. So I'm down to 14%, and I'm gonna wiggle around and really figure out where I'd like to put this thing. Now, what we do here is gonna depend on what our plans are, whether it makes sense to have more cut or more fill. I'll try and avoid interfering with that pit wall, except for, we'll pretend there's a reason that we can't be there back here, and we'll push that into the wall near the bottom. So there we are. We've got our benching being applied, and that's that. Now, one thing that is worth noting, I've got my kind of bow tie going on here. If we want to clean up our surface and actually have the fill slope stop at the other fill slope in this case, we can. And so in that, we can come in here, we can go into our terrain options. We can tell it to, let's create a graded feature. And while that is just calculating and updating that, I'll just pop something else open. So here, that's run. And we can see now it's not showing us the, focus on the 3D side of things. It's not extending surface in on other surfaces. It's actually modeling that. So when it comes time to export that for construction, it's just as simple as going File, Save As, changing our extension to whatever we like. So if we want to preserve our surface information, we will export that out as land XML. So that's a quick ramp example. And I mentioned I was, I'll let that run. That functionality of being able to make our cut some fill slopes a graded feature really opens you up to have more flexibility to do things like this, where we've got our fill slopes stacked on other fill slopes. Now with this, if we want to produce our documentation, we absolutely can. We can go to our multi-plot editor, and we could build this out one view at a time. So plan over profile. In this case, I'm not going to. I'm going to just make sure I've got my page size set the way I'd like. I'm going to bring in a pre-formatted chapter to use as a starting point. I'm going to customize some things here to match what I'd like. So changing my scales. So we've got our plan over profile. We can move this around if we want to move things around. And if we want to create another chapter with our cross-section information, we absolutely can. And same thing, we want to change our scales here to capture all the information we have. Maybe use a larger sheet, maybe change how many cross sections we have per page. So really easy to get your documentation together. Plot as a PDF, and away we go. Now the last thing to mention here is for these linear projects, if we want to produce our volume estimates and quantities, back in the longer one, we can see the mass haul is tracking our surplus and deficits. If we want to tackle our total subgrade cut, total fill cut, surfacing specs, we absolutely can, and we do that in our data table. So we can control how frequently we get our rows, and we can control what information that we see in the columns. So that is my kind of overview of mining functionality, and I apologize for the hiccup there at the start. As I said, I was testing some things that I guess I shouldn't have been testing right before a presentation. Yeah, there's certainly way more depth that we can dive into these things, but that's that kind of flyover for the functionality as it pertains to mining. I think we have a few questions.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, we do have. So somebody asked if we can share the files of this presentation. That says that it will be easier if we have the right files. So yes, by all means, we can share those files. If you can just want to shoot us here an email address at the panel questions, and yeah, by all means. Then we have another question here. Can you cover it? Oh, sorry. Can you cover if you have a pit boundary and need to grade down, say like 25 feet or meters?
Okay.
How would you do that in terrain?
Okay. Let's jump back in here. So this is that example that I was kind of clicking around with as a pit example. I've just hit Control A and delete on my keyboard. So I'm going to draw this in from scratch. Now let's choose somewhere different to do this. So I'm just drawing in, and I'm not really worried about I'm not really worried about anything here. It's a fictional project. But if I want to take that and have that set on the ground, I can. So I'm going to just turn off the elevation property. So that's actually, we're going to have our selected feature. We turn off our elevation property if we were in the current topo, but we aren't. So I'm going to tell it to drape on the original ground surface that we're using, and we're going to tell it to include our tin points. So now it's up there on our surface, and we're going to want this to be a break line. Now, for this, just for the sake of kind of making it a little simpler, I'm going to simplify my features so I don't have all kinds of and unnecessary points. So I've thinned it down to only be 43 points. Same thing, I want to know the direction of this feature. So we'll go through here. And well, if I want to grade down from this current elevation, I can see my elevation here, 336.7. If I want to go down to say 316.7, I'm going to go back up here, grading, standard, grade to an elevation 316.7. Again, set our cuts and fill slopes to be whatever we'd like. I'll just leave it at 1:1. I don't really need interpolate here where it's a fairly high resolution surface, but we'll be cautious and include it. We'll go with that. And so same premise as what we did before. We went to the inside instead of the outside, and I should have turned that off. So now I had the tin boundary set as my inside. I shouldn't have that. I'd want to grade the whole thing, or calculate a tin for the whole thing. So we can see instead of going up from the pit floor like I did before, I've gone down from the inside, and away we are. I'm going to get rid of that triangle by making that a band. There we are. So we absolutely can grade from the outside in rather than from the inside out. Just a matter of selecting the right direction when you're doing that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I have another question here that I think I can answer this one, Matt. So it's about the recorded this version, if it's going to be recorded. Yes, we are going to posting this video on our YouTube channel soon. Maybe not today, but soon. And you will have an email with the link to watch that video again. And now for you, Matt. I have a next question. It says, can you design a pit in location using the bench template?
Yeah, and for that I won't do the whole thing, but you absolutely can. The way I would do it is just basically use the center line to delimit your pit floor, grade up, and so if we went the whole way around things, we could use that as our basis, grade up, and then just save that out as a terrain file. Save that out as a TRX file, and then we can take that into terrain and we can use that as our tin surface. Yeah, the volume calculations in location are going to be based off cross sections, so that is where we want to go back into terrain and do it as that tin subtraction to get the total area of those large, or the total volume of those large projects that aren't really well represented as a center line with cross sections. But you can certainly lean on the functionality of templates to make it really easy to see how you're going to interact with the surrounding terrain and get those limits the way you'd like.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. Now, this is a good question, and we hear there's a lot of excitement about the pathfinding functionality. So this question is, when is the new path tool coming out? It's coming out.
I don't know. It's it'll be released first to our folks on support that would like to be beta users. We're still in the, well, as I've mentioned, the UI isn't ironed out. We're still kind of polishing things and making it even better and better every day. So we aren't really at a point where we're saying version 11 comes out this date. First folks that will have availability will be our beta users, and hopefully availability for them will come out in within a few months.
Excellent. Okay, and we are running out of time. We still have a few questions. We will tackle those on an email. Sorry for not taking care of all the questions right now, but we're running out of time. And yes, with this, it's time to go. Thank you very much, Matt.
All right.
See you next time.
Thank you, guys.